Okay, everyone. Shalom, shalom. So there's an option here under, let's see where it is, reactions. No, there's a way to wave. Let me find that. Way to wave. Let's see if we could do that. Okay. Okay, I'm not sure how that's done. I'll try more again. There is an ability of, maybe that's a wave or a clap. That's a clap. That's a thumbs up. In the chat, not sure. Okay, so if someone has
raise a hand.
Oh, how do you do that?
Let me try.
Oh, you guys did that. Okay. Wonderful. So this way, we'll keep everyone muted. If someone has a question, please feel free to raise your hand. My thoughts are, if it's a question related to me not being clear, I'm going too quickly, or I'm speaking about topics that are unfamiliar to you, and you'd like a little more information on it, please raise your hand and I'll explain. Otherwise, what I think we'll do is we'll save the questions to the end at 8 o'clock. That way it will be a smoother run. Okay, so the four sons are a section of the Haggadah that is famous, prominent. It is not central to the Passover Haggadah in the sense of, in the Talmud and the Mishnah, when it talks about what the ingredients of the Haggadah should be, it's not there. It is taken from, or it is coexists with other ancient rabbinic texts, but not necessarily was it originally in the Passover Haggadah. But it has become something that illustrators, illuminators, artists alike have liked to draw. Plus, it is, in many ways, symbolic of the entire endeavor of the Seder. So I'm going to begin by sharing a screen of a text. Now, this text, I did not share it with the email. But let's begin by taking a look at this is the Mishnah. Mishnah is the first redaction, or the edited version of the oral tradition, about the year 200 of the Common Era, but it has many descriptions of what was done in the time of the Second Temple as well. So here is the description of the Seder. They mixed him a second cup, and here the son questions his father. If the child lacks the intelligence to ask, his father instructs him. Why is this night different from all other nights? And all other nights we dip once, and this night we dip twice. So there's a few versions of that as far as the order goes. On all other nights we chametz matzah. On this night only matzah. On all other nights we roasted, stewed, or boiled meat, and this night only roasted. I missed the maror question. And all other nights we eat other vegetables, and tonight we only eat maror. So some of it fell out of the English. But the four questions that we're all familiar with is designed if the child doesn't know how to ask on their own, so you teach the child how to ask. That's the Mishnah. So our Manish Tana is really one where we're teaching the question, so to speak, because the ideal of the Passover night is, like the Torah tells us, when your child asks you. When someone asks a question, they have an investment. They have a commitment to the answer. They're going to be listening better than anyone else in the class if they have the question. So here, the child who you're trying to convey the experience to, they begin with a question. As a matter of fact, in Jewish law, we say, even if there's no one else there, just appear, we ask each other, and if we're alone, we ask ourselves the question. Okay, and then here's a key line. And according to the son's intelligence, his father instructs him. And then we go on to the ingredients of the Haggadah itself, which we're not going to go into right now. So many see the concept of the four sons as being an outgrowth of this value system of according to the child's intelligence, he is instructed. Let's go a little bit further. This is from Maimonides, Laws of Chametz and Matzah, chapter 7. Maimonides has, the Rambam has the most incredible book of laws. When I say incredible, I mean it's a prototype for all future books of law that exist in the Jewish world. He took from the Talmud and the Mishnah, which were also organized both Jewish law, Jewish values, Jewish philosophy, and he gathered from all the vast sea of the oral tradition and organized the laws in a very concise way. And although many had issues with his conclusions, certain conclusions, his sources or lack thereof, which is another conversation about the evolution of Jewish law and the works of Jewish law. So here he is, though, in the laws of Chametz and Matzah. And he brings a quote, "It's a mitzvah to inform one's child even though they do not ask." Earlier he said it has to be done with a question. As the verse says, you shall tell your son. A father should teach his son according to the son's knowledge. How is this applied? So Maimonides gives his own example. I'm not sure if there's another antecedent for this example that he gives. He says, make it real. If the son is young or foolish, he should tell him, my son, in Egypt, we were all slaves like this maidservant or this slave. In those days, it was still servitude of some sort. He says, there goeth I, but for the grace of God. That could be me. You're trying to make the child understand what freedom is. Of course, the question then is, well, should we really be having servants? But this isn't a time when there was servants, and Jewish law does have rules about humane, if you can call it that, but more humane, how you treat your workers and servants. But then on this night, the Holy One, blessed be He, redeemed us and took us out to freedom. So if you see, Maimonides merges two things, young or foolish, and then if the son is older and wise, because you could be old and foolish as well, then you should tell them all the stories that happened in Egypt, the miracles wrought for us by Moses, our teacher, everything according to the son's knowledge. He uses that same language of the Mishnah, which was, 1,000 years earlier. Halacha 3, and this is an interesting aside. I don't want to focus on it too much. You should make changes on this night so the children will see and be motivated to ask. What should they be motivated to ask? Manishtana halayla zeh mikol haleilos. Why is this night different? What has happened to us is we have formalized the inquisitiveness of the child until we've had them memorize. Manishtana halayla zeh mikol haleilos. And all the schools, although not this year because the children are all being homeschooled this year, but in all the schools, they're busy memorizing the Manishtana when really we're supposed to be teaching the children or allowing the children to have their innate curiosity be expressed. And we do certain things differently. And in every culture, these different types of things had evolved. And Maimonides quotes 3 from the Talmud. He says, first he has to respond. This is what happened. In other words, the Manishtana in our haggada is a ritualized text. Originally, it was supposed to be a poor substitute for a child that didn't have the maturity or the intelligence to ask questions. So he then says, what changes? Either we give them dessert before the meal, we give them roasted seeds and nuts, or they move the table away before we eat. This is, in our day, we don't have our own individual tables. We move away the kara, the plate, and matzah should be snatched from each other and the like. This is the source for stealing afikomen. Really, there's a quote in the Talmud, but it can be interpreted and understood in different ways. One of the ways it's understood is that in Maimonides' time, they would grab the matzah from one participant from the other, and the kids were like, why is Uncle Harry grabbing Mother's matzah? And they would say, oh, it's a special occasion. In other words, it is to stimulate the question. So this is the law of how you tell this story. But the 4 sons are a secondary text in the Haggadah, which we're going to analyze. The plan is right now it's 7:09. We'll go through the biblical and rabbinic texts for about half the time, and then we'll go to the illuminated haggadahs and the artwork. Okay. So in our haggadah, so before we read the three sons from the haggadah, I just want to clarify. The haggadah is a midrash, which means it takes biblical verses and expounds upon them. But the expansion of these biblical verses and the lessons are not always literal. There are sometimes just with ethical, moral, or educational, or spiritual messages that they're using as a springboard, the biblical text. This is not necessarily a strict literal interpretation of the biblical text. We have 4 places in the Torah where it tells us about teaching your son and telling them about Passover, or rather about how God took us out of Egypt on Passover. In the Haggadah, they are woven together. These 4 different ideas are woven together to become a one unified whole of how to speak to different types of children. You know what? Maybe we'll look at the biblical verses first before we get to the text of the Haggadah. I'm scrolling down past Haggadah, past alternative readings, to page 4. Biblical sources for the 4 sons. So when I say biblical sources, these are the biblical verses that are quoted for the most part in the Haggadah, proving, or rather using the text for what the question is of the child and what the answer is. So in Exodus 12:5 through 27, this is the period before they leave Egypt, where God is speaking to Moses, and Moses is telling the Jews how they should prepare with a Seder as anticipation of the night of freedom. And on this night, they shall eat this is God talking to Moses. They shall eat the flesh roasted over the fire and unleavened cakes. With bitter herbs they shall eat it. And this day shall be for you as a memorial, and you shall celebrate as a festival for the Lord throughout your generations. You shall celebrate as an everlasting statute. So Moses then calls the Jewish people, the elders together, tells them about taking the Paschal lamb, take the hyssop, put the blood on the door. The Lord will smite the Egyptians. Verse 24, and you shall keep this matter as a statute for you and your children forever. Not the blood on the door. There are certain things that are kept forever, other things not. Again, that's another conversation. But verse 25, it shall come to pass when you enter the land the Lord will give you, as he spoke, that you shall observe this service. The Hebrew word avodah, this service, which just by the way, is similar to the word servitude. So, which we'll get to. But avodah, you shall observe this service. That's what God says. Do the service of Passover night, the Paschal lamb in particular. And then it will come to pass when, or Hebrew could be if, when or if your children say to you, what is this service to you? So they're going to say to you, what is this service? You shall say, it is a Passover sacrifice to the Lord. We passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt when he smote the Egyptians and he saved our houses. Now the people hearing Moses kneeled and prostrated themselves. Why did they kneel and prostrate themselves? They were thanking God for 2 things that he said. Number 1 is 3 things. He said you're going to enter the land and you're going to have children. Those 2 blessings, those 2 things, I'm sorry, for entering the land and for having children. Now, you're going to see how the biblical verses are used as a smorgasbord to take, or as a tool chest to take different parts of the quotes and reform them into 4 sons. It is really not an accurate description that each one of the 4 sons of our Haggadah come from a clear biblical verse. They pick and choose. But this is the first from Exodus. Oops. The second from Exodus is about the firstborn, of redeeming the firstborn. So take a look in chapter 13. Moses says to the people, remember when you came out of Egypt, and for the mighty hand God took you out of here. Do not eat chametz. Today is the springtime. You will come to the land of Israel, verse 5, and I'll give you a land flowing with milk and honey. You should eat matzah and not eat chametz for verse 6 and 7. And then verse 8. You shall tell your son on that day. The Hebrew word, vihigadata. And you shall tell. Same word as haggada. Vihigadata. But there's no question here. Just you shall tell. Then we have verse 9. I copied the whole chapter because you'll see that the questions in the Bible, in the Torah, are not necessarily about the holiday of Passover, but it is related to Passover. And it shall be to you a sign upon your hand as a remembrance between your eyes. That means it's tefillin, the phylacteries. And you should keep it year after year. And then we have verse 12, that the firstborn of an animal will be yours. The firstborn of an animal should go to God. This is called the Bechor, the firstborn. And you're supposed to redeem it. And then after redeeming it is a ritual where you would take another animal and give it in place of that animal, or give money to the priest. I'm sorry. For a child, you're giving money. For an animal, for a donkey, you would give in exchange of another animal. Okay, verse 14. When it will come to pass, if your son asks you in the future, saying, what is this? Mazos. When he will ask you, you shall say, with a mighty hand did the Lord take us out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. So it's really asking about the rituals of giving the firstborn animal to the priest, or giving the equivalent of 5 coins to the priest instead of, so to speak, giving your child. Of course, we don't give our child, but the ritual is to give them something because God saved us when we passed through, in Egypt, when he passed through, and did not smite the firstborn of ours. So we, so to speak, give our firstborn to the Kohen, and we redeem them back. The ritual even has to the father, you want your kid, or do you want to give an exchange? And the father says, I want to give an exchange. That's the firstborn, the first opening of the womb, and with animals as well, used to be given to the Kohen. Okay, that's source 2. Source 3 is the long Deuteronomy is going through many commandments that God gives us. And at the end of these long commandments, verse 17 on page 7, diligently keep the commandments of the Lord your God, his testimonies, and his statutes which he has commanded you. There are many words for mitzvot in the Torah. There are testimonies, there are chukim, statutes, which refer to supernatural laws, super rational laws, things like kosher, which the reasons are not given in the Torah. Then you have testimonies like Shabbat or Passover, where the reasons are given or self-understood that once they're explained, they're understandable. Like keep the Sabbath day to remember that I created the world in 6 days and rested on the 7th. Eat the matzah to remember how I took you out of Passover. They make sense once you explain them. And then finally, there's the rational laws that every culture, or natural law that we would even learn from animals. We learn cleanliness from a cat, hard work from an ant. So our sages tell us that the Torah combines 3 primary types of commandments. Keep them all. And then even more than that, you should do what is proper and good in the eyes of the Lord, which means even if the letter of the law allows you to do something, do what is proper and good. And since I have my land use attorney on, so right of first refusal, according to the Talmud, is based on this verse. That if you have a neighbor who is selling farming land, we may have a farmer on as well, you should be able to purchase it first rather than a stranger if your land abuts your neighbor's land. And there are many other such laws that are associated with doing what is proper and good. If it doesn't hurt you, and it doesn't hurt, so go beyond the letter of the law and help a fellow out. All right, but then he says, if your son asks you in time to come, saying, what are the testimonies, the statutes, and the ordinances which the Lord your God has commanded you? What are these different types of laws? So now you shall say, the question what in the biblical text is, why are we keeping them? Because look at the answer. The answer in the biblical text is You shall say to your son, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and the Lord took us out of Egypt with a strong hand. And God gave signs and wonders great and terrible upon Egypt, on Pharaoh, upon all his household before our eyes. And he commanded us, he brought us out of there in order they might bring us and give us this land which he swore to our forefathers. And by keeping them, so I may have skipped one of the sons. So here we have what we would call the wise son's question, although the answer, as we'll see, is not the same. Then we had, in Exodus, we had 2 here. Verse 14, and it will come on your son, the simple son. What is this? We tell him with a mighty hand. And then we have earlier, we have, you shall tell your child, which is a child that doesn't know how to ask, there's no question. And finally, the first one is the one we call the wicked son, where he tells you, he doesn't ask, he tells you, and you shall say to him, verse 27, the answer is different than our sages give in the Haggadah. So I want to clarify for those who just joined. The Haggadah is a rabbinic text. It's a midrash. It is teaching us things about education, about values. So let's take a look. Not necessarily is it a literal understanding of the text. So we begin though, and because of the limitations of time, each one of these paragraphs we can analyze. But I want to be able to get the core ideas here. We begin with a blessing. So first of all, the son that we bowed and thanked God for the children, that happened to be the one we call the wicked one. In that biblical text, where the people are thanking God for that he said, when you come to the land, you'll have children who will say to you, what is the service to you? And you shall tell them, blank, blank, blank. The people were overjoyed that they were going to enter the land and they were going to have children. Even if the children would ask questions and not just ask questions, be rejecting. They would be rejecting it. It still is a blessing. But we begin with 4 blessings. Throughout the Haggadah, each section of the Haggadah is really a sandwich between praises. Since the point of the Haggadah is that we should feel as if we left Egypt and we should call out to God and thank him. So the patterns of the Haggadah there are these praises and blessings scattered throughout. We begin with Baruch HaMakom Baruch Hu. This is like a little blessing before we learn Torah. Blessed is he who gave the Torah to his people Israel, blessed be he. The Torah speaks of 4 children. One is wise, one is wicked, one is simple, and one does not know how to ask. The juxtaposition of these 4 next to each other. Echad Chacham, Echad Rasha, Ve'echad Tam, Ve'echad She'enei Lishol, also has messages for us. Why is the wicked son next to the wise son? Seemingly he should be at the end. And one of the messages the Lubavitcher Rebbe derived is that a wise son shouldn't pat himself on the back too quickly and feel as if he is he's saved, he's okay, he's a wise son, and he's a good boy. Sin crouches by the door. You can mess up in a minute. Don't be so quick to be full of your self-aggrandizement and your pride. Even if you are good, be wary, be careful. Also, the wise son has to realize that his responsibility is for his neighbor. That the one that is rebelling is also wise. He's not foolish, he's wise. And you have a responsibility as the wise son to look out for the other. And the wicked son has to be aware that there's a wise son around, a wise child, someone that can help him out of his issues. All right. So the first question is the wise son. What does he say? He asks a question: what are the testimonies, the statutes, and the laws which your Lord our God have commanded you? So you in turn teach him all the laws of Passover, all the way up till we do not eat any dessert after the Passover lamb. After the Afikomen, which originally was a Passover lamb, we don't eat anything else, which means you teach him A to Z. The wise, if you see from these questions, much of the discussion is about the commandments of the night. As a matter of fact, in the biblical text where it says that God says, ba'avor zeh, because of this I took you out of Egypt. So some read that God, some read the biblical text in its original as meaning God is telling the Jewish people, the reason I took you out of Egypt is that you should be able to serve me and enter in a relationship with me by keeping Passover and the other commandments. In other words, there are two ways of reading that text. Are we keeping the commandments in commemoration of the miracles that God did? Or did God do the miracles for us in order to enter into this relationship where we keep his commandments? In other words, the commandments are ways to connect to the divine. The miracles are the means to an end. So we can look, and throughout the Haggadah and throughout Jewish history and rituals, you could look both ways. For sure, there are stories there are rituals that commemorate historical events, but also the act of the mitzvah, of the deed, of the commandment has a value of its own, independent of the historical event. So the wise one is asking, teach me all the laws. In the original that we looked at, the biblical text, he's really asking, why are we keeping them? And in the biblical text, we answered, because God took us out of Egypt. Here, we're changing it into a question of intellectual curiosity about Jewish law and behavior and ethics. Teach him it all. Teach him everything, all the laws. If the child is intellectually curious, don't set any boundaries. I want to jump ahead for a minute. One way of reading this is that it is teaching us how to teach. Do not answer a question. Answer the questioner. We take these biblical verses and we create a rabbinic midrash, which is telling us you have to know who is asking the question. The same question coming from one person and coming from another is a totally different question. So we're talking not about the questions, but about the personalities and the people. So if someone is serious and wants to know and wants to understand, teach them. Teach them everything. Do not minimize and do not, if a child has intelligence, don't make him sit in the classroom with, give him work, independent work that he or she can grow in. Don't limit. And don't assume limitations either. Okay, that's one approach. I'll give you a little mystical, for each one I'll give you a little mystical approach before we go into the artwork. The mystical approach says the wise son, the wise child, the wise one is asking, why is there differentiation? Why do I even have to know any reasons for the commandments? If God told me to do them, that's the way I connect myself to the divine. That's God's will. Why do I need to have levels of laws? Some of them are rational, that people come up, every culture and society comes up on their own. Others are statutes, which are testimonials. I'm sorry, not statutes, testimonials, which are understood once they testify to a historic event or a miracle or to a value. And then you have the chukim, the statutes, the super rational laws, like kosher and impurity. Why have distinction? God should just command us. Why do we have to understand? We tell the child that it's not enough to follow God's will because he tells you to. God wants the mind and the heart as well. He wants you to understand and he wants you to feel. And we find this with afikomen. Afikomen is not eaten when you're hungry. It is eaten at the end of the meal, when you're satiated. And it's supposed to give you pleasure. You're not supposed to be so full that you can't eat the Paschal lamb. You have this paradox. On one hand, it's not necessary, it's not needed, and it is just giving you pleasure. So the message in this mystical reading of the text is that God does not just want the mind, he wants your pleasure too. There are people that serve God. God told me to, I'll do it. And some may do it from very high spiritual status. Whatever God wants, I'll do. What I feel doesn't matter. No. We say we do want you to serve God because it's the right thing and because he wants you to. But you also should try to understand to the best of your ability. And you should try to feel. So the wicked son is really the most fun here. And problematic in our answer to him. In the Torah, this is not the answer that is given. The answer we gave was connected to the story of Passover. But here in this version, the wicked one, what does he say? He says, what is a service to you? He says to you, but not to him. By thus excluding himself from the community, he is denied that which is fundamental. You therefore blunt his teeth and say to him, it's because of this that the Lord did for me when I left Egypt. For me, but not for him. If he had been there, he would not have been redeemed. So what you have here is the rebel. He's sitting at the Seder table. And at the Seder table, he's saying, what are you guys doing? And the same Hebrew word of service is being used. The same word that's used for servitude, like the Torah uses. But he's saying, what are you guys making yourself crazy for? Why are you doing this? And he excludes himself. See, here's a fundamental. When it comes to laws of conversion in Judaism, there are two things a person has to accept to become Jewish. And they need circumcision if they're a male. They need to go to mikveh, male and female. And they need a court, a beit din to be there and to witness. They have to accept the commandments. And you tell them that you should know that before becoming part of the Jewish people, you're tying your destiny to their destiny. What happens to them will happen to you. So if the person says, yes, I accept the commandments and I accept this destiny, then you can accept them as a convert. But if somebody says, nah, I like the commandments, but the Jews I'm not such a big fan of, we don't, such a person has not joined the people of Israel. In other words, to be part of the Jewish people, it is not enough to do what's right. You have to be part of the community. The famous joke they would say is, if you ask a Jew, he says to you, I love Jews. Jews are wonderful. How about Goldstein? Goldstein, that thief, forget it. And how about Goodman? Oh, Goodman, that guy, who can deal with him? He's such a nudge. You ask a Gentile, what do you think of Jews? Oh, Jews, I can't stand them all. What about Goldstein? Oh, he's a wonderful man. How about Goodman? Oh, Mrs. Goodman cooks chicken soup for me. In other words, this is a joke, but the idea is that in Hebrew, it's called denying God by denying the community. If you exclude yourself from the community, you have been kafar be'ikr. You have denied God himself. Now, in here it's translated fundamental, but in rabbinic teachings, the word kafar be'ikr means to deny God. All right, now we have something harsh. We blunt his teeth and say to him, it's because of this that the Lord did for me when I left Egypt. For me, but not for him. You're already not talking to him anymore. If he had been there, he would not have been redeemed. One of the great challenges of the literal understanding is that they're all sitting at the Seder together. All these four children are sitting together. And the Rasha is not just having an influence on himself, he's also influencing the other children. His anger, his rudeness is influencing them. So there's a necessity, so to speak, to talk not just to him, but also to the observers. Nevertheless, this is still a strong text, and there are different ways of reading it. Lubavitcher Rebbe has a beautiful way of reading this story, and he says, we're telling the wicked son, you want to opt out of Judaism? You can't. You can't opt out. You can opt in and become Jewish, someone who's not Jewish, but there's no opting out. A Jew is a Jew is a Jew. If I told somebody, and I see this in my own life, if a Jew who keeps no Torah mitzvahs, keeps nothing, wants to hold on to the identity that I am a Jew. To deny that you are a Jew is something which, across the board, most Jews avoid doing, even those who don't even claim they don't believe in God. Or as it said, they don't believe in God, but God believes in them. But either way, we're telling the wicked son that before we left Egypt, you could have opted out. You could have chosen to stay in Egypt and assimilate or whatever else would happen to those who stayed behind in Egypt. But once you stood at Sinai, the chosen mission for the Jew is whether you like it or not. You may, push off your inevitable destiny of returning to your people and returning to your faith, but it's there. It's part of it. Maybe this lifetime, maybe another lifetime. Thank God for reincarnation. We get to clean our rooms at some point in our history. But the point, though, is that we're telling the wicked son that if you were in Egypt, you could have opted out. Today, not. So really, it's an embrace as well. Tam Mahu Omer, what does the simple one say? The simple one is influenced by miracles and wonders, and you describe the miracles and wonders that God did for them. The one that does not know how to ask, you must initiate him. And in Hebrew, it's at sachlo. In Hebrew, at is the female, not ata. And the concept is that that when we speak to the one who does not know how to ask, you have to do it in a soft manner, in a nurturing way. In addition, at, aleph to taf are the A to Z of the Hebrew alphabet. Don't stop. Don't stop your teaching with the youngest or the one that doesn't know how to ask, but open the door, open the door and teach them everything as well. As a matter of fact, like we saw in the original reading of the Haggadah of the Mishnah, that the Manishtana and much of the Seder is seemingly designed around the one that doesn't know how to ask. Because the other ones ask questions, you answer their questions. The Haggadah in many ways is for this one, the one that doesn't know how. The Rebbe once said, maybe more than once, the one that doesn't know how to ask can be an adult, can be a religious Jew, can be someone very learned, but he doesn't care. He's doing it. My father did it. My grandfather did it. I'm a traditionalist. I keep what you tell me to do. That's, in a way, apathy is worse than the antagonism of the wicked son. She'enei Elisho, the one who does not know how to ask, can be the one who doesn't care to ask. So the enemy of involvement, rabbis are not competing with other synagogues. Synagogues are not competing with each other. We're competing with apathy, with not caring. So back to this, we're going to take a quick look, and then we'll go to the artwork. So these four, though, are answering individuals. Each one, we begin with, in the beginning, we said, each one, Echad Chacham, Echad Rasha, Echad Tam, Echad She'enei Elisho. One is wise, one is wicked. So the story is told of a Hasidic Rebbe who, when he walked after his Seder, he went outside and with his assistant, and they were listening to the sounds of the Haggadah coming from different windows. And one of these simple people was reading the Haggadah, and when we say, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, we elongate the Echad, because we're supposed to meditate on how God is one in the heavens above and the earth and the four directions. Echad is an acronym in Hebrew for those things. So we go, Echad. That's how people say the last line of the Shema. And this simple man who didn't know what he was reading Echad Chacham, as if he was reading the Shema, Echad Rasha. So the assistant started laughing because this man didn't even understand the word one in Hebrew, Echad. And his Rebbe said to him, don't laugh. This man is expressing a true reality that within each one of the four of the Seder lies hidden the Echad, the oneness of the divine. The idea that each one of these four sons children, can be found within each one of us. There are things that I'm intellectually curious about. There are things that I'm rebelling and antagonistic towards. There are things that I do with simplicity. And then there are things that either I don't know to ask or I don't care to ask. So the four sons of the Haggadah, the four children, are really inside each one of us as well. I want to go down for a moment, and then we'll go to the artwork. There are different, the Haggadah is a collection of rabbinic thought. So there are different versions of the rabbinic, of the four sons, the rabbinic interpretation of the model of four is very common in rabbinic writings about different types of people, different types of things. And these four biblical verses are the text that they use. But if you look at the Jerusalem Talmud, they have a slightly different version for the wicked son. He says, "What is this trouble that you are forcing upon us each and every year? Since he excluded himself from the nation, you should say to him," so it doesn't say set his teeth on edge or blunt his teeth. It doesn't say that. It says God did for me, he did for me, and not for that person. Osa ha'ish. We're really making him third person. So some people want to say that the original or earlier versions of it were a response to different groups that broke off from schisms that were created in the Jewish people by different cults and groups that ultimately developed into other religions. And the idea was that the wicked son is sitting at the Seder and he's trying to bring in this foreign religion. And that what are you doing? The law is a burden. What is this trouble you're forcing upon us each and every year? So that's one interpretation. But on a deeper level, it's when we start to feel that the mitzvot are a burden, then that is an expression we should know of that's a sign and a symptom that all is not right in our relationship with God and with the mitzvot. I know I had a good story to say here. I know I had a good story to say. Forgot what it was. Okay. I had a story to say. I don't remember. Okay. So we are going to go to the actual artwork of the Haggadah. If I remember the story, I will interrupt myself in a moment. I know what I was going to say. So what I was going to say is the four sons, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe said, the four sons end up on the high holidays as well. They show up for services. Where do they show up? They show up in the sukkah. They are the four kinds. The lulav, the esrog, the myrtle, and the willow also represent four different types of people. But by that time, the birth of the Jewish people is on Passover. And from Passover to the high holidays, we're working on ourselves and we're developing ourselves. So that by the time Passover is over and then we get to the high holidays, at that point, they're all taken together in unity, in oneness, and complementing one another. Instead of the antagonism that begins to exist, it begins at the Seder table. In other words, diversity that here is existing, each one separately, and how you respond to them, the ultimate is to recognize the strengths of each one. Even the wicked son has incredible strengths. He's intelligent, he cares, he's involved, he's vested. There was this reporter who was from Israel, but he was very anti-Israel. And he was always writing things against Israel. But he wrote for a Yiddish paper in New York. And he came by the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said to him, "I enjoy your writing." And he said, "Rebbe, you agree with me?" And the Rebbe said, "If I read only things I agreed with, I would read very little. But you have a talent, and you should use your talent for good." The point of the wicked son is ultimately, some would say, the mystics say that each cup is connected to another sun. So the second cup, which we spend all the time on, which is the middle Magid, the telling of the story, is connected to this wicked son. It's about transforming that which is within. Okay, so I'm going to go through the about 30 different slides of images of the four sons. Some of these are from illuminated manuscripts, but then I will get to others that are from print. Oh, my battery's running low. Okay, I don't want to die. Give me a second. I'm sorry, everyone. Okay, maybe 1 second. Okay, so without further ado, we have electricity, we are connected. So if you'll see from the value system of the artists that they chose different imagery to depict the different elements. So the wicked son in these early medieval illuminated manuscripts are soldiers, military. For the Jew, the military, the warrior was more connected to Esau, was more connected to Rome, was more connected to the Gentile of who were antagonistic. So it became a motif. Violence was the motif of the wicked one. In general, in Hebrew, when Moses sees an Egyptian beating the Jew, he stands up for him, for the slave. And later on, he sees these two Jews fighting with one another. He says to one who lifts up his hand, "Wicked one, why would you hurt your friend?" In Hebrew, the wickedness is very much connected to violence. So you'll see that as a motif. Okay, the wise one has a book. The book, the study, the learning is connected to the wise one. Although here it's connected to the Tom, the one that is considered Jacob is also called the Tom, the sincere one, the simple one. The Hebrew simple one could also mean a positive as well. All right, so here we go. This is already a later edition. It's a manuscript, but it's from the 1700s. We're going to discover something fascinating. If you look at the bottom of these four, I'm going to turn around the camera so you can see the imagery. What you're going to see, maybe it's not letting me. Hold on. All right, start it again. I'm sorry. I'm going to turn it around so those people can see it. To rejoin. Okay, so the imagery here, it's a handwritten haggada, but it's from the 17th century. And if you look at the bottom where you have these images, you're going to see that the artist took these from a wood cutting, that took them from different illustrations in the non-Jewish world that were common in the time. And we'll go through a few of those, and then we'll look at different other different images as we go along. Okay, so here we have the wicked one is wrestling is either hunting or with a dog. I can't see exactly. And here we go, the wise son with a book. The wicked son, I wish I could see if I could pull in this and make it bigger. But the wicked son is here. The wicked son is holding someone's head with an axe. This is the symbol in Judaism of the wicked son. The wicked son is not wicked son. The wicked one this is wickedness. Okay. Oops. So, and the one that does not know how to ask has their hands spread out as a question. Let's try. Okay. Now, if you take a look, this is a famous Passover haggada from 1695. And these four sons are copied. Everyone would steal wood cuttings from each other and images in those days. There was no copyright law. But the four sons, the wise is on the right, the wicked one is armored with a weaponry, all from different periods. The Tom is like a shepherd, and the one who does not know how to ask is like a little man. So this is from Avram ben Yaakov, the four sons. Now, if you take a look, the images really come from if you look at the wise son, it's Herodotus on the bottom. This is from different non-Jewish works of the time. You see the hand being stretched out over. That's exactly the hand of the wise son in the Hebrew Haggadah. In the Haggadah, they're taking the exact same image and they copy it. And then you take a look at the one that does not know how to ask. There it is. There's young Hannibal being sworn in. So that image is taken from there. And then we have from an illuminated Bible. All these are by non-Jewish, a Swiss a Swiss engraver that created these. And if you take a look, we have the king of Assyria, the Assyrian army running away, and that soldier running away becomes the same king, the same wicked son, the same, here it is, the same soldier is taken from this image and placed there. Okay, and then the simple son is again from the same Marianne, I think his name is, where Samuel's anointing Saul. So these are non-Jewish engravings that the artist just copied. Okay, there's another idea. These are 6 stages of man. These are, medieval philosophy about the 6 stages of man. So some of these images also end up when you start speaking about the 4 children. So again, artists, did not necessarily base themselves on Jewish imagery. They took from all sorts of places, but informed at time by different Jewish values. So, for example, in the back, so the idea that the simple son is Saul, who is humble and is self-effacing. That's like the simple son. The idea of the wicked one being a warrior, etc. So there are connections, but it's interesting to see the evolution of it. Okay, so here we have these wood cuttings, and as I go through it, I have some notes that I will cover. Okay, so on this one, this is the Prague Haggada, 1526, and we have some quotes above, which is wisdom revives the person who possesses it. And the last one is your children should learn. So it quotes biblical verses that describe these things. All right, here we have, going back, that the 4 sons connected to those 4 images from the non-Jewish illuminated, illustrated Bibles and things like that. And we have the similar, the 4 sons here is from the Leipzig Haggada, and he's actually holding a copy of, if you look at the Haggada the wise son is holding, it is actually the Amsterdam Haggada in which it is based on. Oops. All right. This next one, and then we'll do a little bit more analysis here. This next one, which is the Altona Hamburg Haggada. So again, we have the weaponry, the wise son, etc. Let's get to the more modern period. We get to the modern period. What we have here is the one smoking, leaning back. So again, the imagery here is the wise one is the one studying in the corner, father and mother in the middle, and you have these 2 other children. But this imagery is going to repeat itself. For Jews in the immigrant community in America, the boxer, physical violence was seen as, the one that was on the edge, so to speak. Okay, so here, this image is taken from a Hungarian. If you take a look at the spiked helmet, this is a Prussian soldier with a spiked helmet. That's what we see over here. Then, all right, this next one, I'll get to, here we go. Let's pick another one. Okay. This is the famous Zik Haggada as well. So Zik was in the 40s. He was producing many times reprinted. And the hunter, for a Jew, a hunter, not just physical violence, but hunting for pleasure was also not seen as a typically Jewish endeavor. For food, one could, if you could theoretically slaughter the animal in the proper manner, in the proper way. In Israel, you have these Zionist versions, as we'll see in a moment. This one is still in New York, and the wise one has lines, the wise man lives by his faith. And the wicked son is a revolutionary, setting fire to the world. So again, the time periods matter for the artists. And the simple one is assimilated. He's drinking champagne and sipping plays the guitar and sips champagne, and the little one is a little child. So I would say there's a famous concept given by some modern rabbis that the four children are the four stages of assimilation that the Jews underwent in America. The first generation came, and it was connected to the past. The next generation, the red diaper babies or whatever they were, the revolutionaries, who were, many of them were running away from their heritage. The next generation is enjoying life. And then finally, you have the one that does not even know how to ask. One of the famous teachings of the Rebbe was that there's a fifth generation, a fifth child. The fifth child is the one that doesn't even show up at the Seder. And because doesn't know it's Passover, not aware of it. Our job is to find that fifth child. Okay, so here we have another image. This is from Saul Raskin. He illuminated and illustrated many different works. So I want to get to the next one, though, which is, here we go. So the top one here is, let's do the next one, sorry. Here. Right, this is the one growing up, was on many of the haggadas. And if you take a look, oops, I must have missed one. Let's see, I missed one. Oh, there it is, sorry. So here we have the wicked son is holding this large dog. And again, not a common sight as a pet, dogs as a pet. So that's the symbolism that they are, the Jews of Eastern Europe do not own dogs, and they usually associated them with their persecutors. Okay, this is a famous one. Again, the smoking, the cigarette, but that's a simple one. The wicked one has an axe again to destroy, whether the faith or others. Right, this is, I believe, from the state of Israel. And the wicked son is a city dweller. Let's see. And if I get this one right, this is, I'm sorry, wrong one. No, sorry. In this one, everyone looks very pastoral and harmless. It is, here we have, let's see if this is the one. In 1321. So the wise son, this is a Zionistic one, a little bit abstract, but the wise son is a religious person. The wicked son is a city dweller with money in his pocket. The simple son is the immigrant. Let's see if I'm finding them correctly here. The next one is also. Oh, here we are. This is the one. Right, here we are. The wise son is this religious person. The wicked son is with his cash in his pocket. This is 1321, right? And the immigrant of the simple one, and the one that does not know how to ask is a religious child that doesn't know much about the world. This is from a Zionist perspective. So this next one is an interesting one. What you have here, each one is a different image from the Bible. Or rather, they are, or this one is a quartet of musicians. I'm sorry. The wicked one has a drum. Wicked one has a drum. Let's see if we can find that. Oh, here we are. Right. So the wise one has a shofar, which is announcing the coming of Mashiach. The wicked one has a drum, which is like war. The simple one has a horn, and the one that does not know how to ask is rattles. So here you have the basic geometric shapes as well. The wise and wicked are circles, the simple is square, and the one that does not know how to ask. And then you have the talus and the one on the left, etc. Here we go. Here you have the wicked son is lighting his cigar. Finally, they figure out a way to mix the smoking together with the rejection of religion. He's using the menorah to light it. He has a big star, which is it's Brezhnev, and he's dressed as a Russian soldier who's lighting his cigar with the menorah. So it is just a way of depicting the wicked. So here's an interesting one. I think we're close to the, here, let's go to this one. Here, each one of them includes the other. So this was by Rachel Rabinowitz, and each four sons has elements of the other within them. And this is an important message, so to speak, that each one of us has one of these children inside of us, or all of them in some way. This one is more like playing cards, called The Blessing of Diversity from the Mas Haggada. So Saskia Mas used to live here. This is by her father. He's an artist, and he illuminates handmade ksubos. So each one is like a card. Every parent is dealt children with varied qualities. So the king has the crown of Torah. The knight is connected to the wicked child. The page is a simple child. And the one who does not know how to ask is the joker. All right, so this is from the animated Haggadah. All right, this one is also a Zionistic one, which comes with a 4 solutions to the Jewish problem. So those in favor of assimilation want to be absorbed into non-Jewish society. The others, the Zionism saw it as going to the state of Israel, and then territorialism saw it as making a state wherever you could find it, and others wanted autonomy within. So this is a Zionistic interpretation. This final one I want to close with here is this one. Each one is a book. You know, in Judaism, a book, we are a book. Each one of us is seen as a book. As a matter of fact, the young child is like on brand new paper, and a old person is like erased many times. The Hebrew word Yisrael, the Jewish people, is seen as an acronym for Yeshishim Riboy Osios Torah. There's 600,000 letters in the Torah. In other words, each one of us is a word, a letter, rather, in the book. So here we have the wise son, the open book with writing. The wicked one is burning the book. The simple one is a blank book. The one that does not know how to ask, it's a closed book. Okay? And to conclude, here is a version from what's her name, from Michal Tzion, is illustrated by Michelle Kishka, rather. That's her name. So we have here the 3 generations. The wise one is reading Psalms, Tehillim, and the one that is, so to speak, wicked is smoking while reading Amos Uz, and the simple one reads a newspaper which says Mazos, and the great-granddaughter is holding an Israeli children's book upside down. But in each generation, people try to find their muse in the 4 children. Now, again, for us, I think that the approach of the Rebbe, that all 4 of the children can be each one of us at some point. And in addition, even the wicked son, we're reaching out with unconditional love and saying, we're separating. When we say in Hebrew, blunt his teeth, in Hebrew it can be read as, take out the shin. Remove the letter shin, which would allow there to just, the Hebrew letters are resh shin ayin, for wicked. And if you remove the shin, which is the Hebrew word for teeth, that middle letter is separating the holy from the unholy. And you separate what's left is ra, the negativity. In other words, the attempt is for everyone, God forbid that the wicked should not be hurt, but the wicked should be transformed. That's the ultimate, that we remove the evil, and that the individual is perfected and corrected. So all 4 of these are each one of us at different times. Each one has a responsibility towards the other. Each one has a positive quality, and ultimately, the idea is that through the next months after Passover, we come together with the 4 kinds, which also represent 4 different types, but this time in unity and complementing and not in antagonism. So many of these images were taken from this book, the Schechter Haggada. So pretty much the printed ones were all taken from here. And it also has a wonderful take on the Jewish history. Well, thank you all. Let's open up for questions. Anyone wants to have a question is welcome to do so. I will set
Thank you, Rob. Thank you very much.
You know, it's just impressive that there's so little art in Judaism, and to see 500 years, or of the depictions of the 4 sons, it's just amazing.
Right. So the truth is, when it comes to art, the Haggadah was one where everybody used their creativity, so to speak, or hired people, or bought nice Haggadahs. You wanted Haggadahs that would be enjoyable for everyone that was there. So
Yeah, but it's also like Torah, you know, there's interpretations for every age.
right.
Every generation is making something new.
Right. I would say one other element is that the Seder takes away the control from the rabbis and the shul, and people are able in their own homes, so to speak, to lead the services in the way they see fit and to pick the text that they like. So the Haggadah, which first of all, every year has to be fresh. So there's always room for new artwork and new imagery and new insights and new ideas. But also it's very empowering when they have this type of selection. Back for a minute about Jewish art. In general, Jewish art is for a purpose to glorify or to beautify, rather, a mitzvah. So it's all, so to speak, with an aim and a purpose. And the Rebbe, I remember in the 80s, the Rebbe very much promoted to buy for the children, to print nice new Haggadahs with nice images in order to excite them about Passover anew. Each time a new book, a new ways of looking at it. Any other thoughts?
Thank you, Rabbi.
You are very welcome. We will see you all tomorrow night. If you can make it, we're going to do a short overview of the whole Passover Seder and try to get it into an hour and how you can do it on your own. We're not going to cover every text, of course, but the entire structure from A to Z. So if you have a Haggadah, try to get a Haggadah out.
Okay.
If not, I will share one online as we share the screen as we go through the Pesach Seder. Thank you all.
Thank you,
Thank
Rabbi.
Rabbi.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
for all this preparation.
A pleasure.
Okay.
Rabbi Yaffe. Thank
See you
you.
tomorrow. Good day there.
Beautiful.